Hey everybody, my name's Alastair Cooke and this is a community presentation around the value of community, particularly the way that the community helps you to help other people. But I forget to introduce myself. This is my second Tech Field Day, and you may remember me from such presentations as the vBrownBag podcast and for a brief time the APAC virtualization podcast. I'm a career trainer, so I teach VMware and aligned technologies, and I live in New Zealand, hence the strange accent. There we go, my laptop runs slow some days. Why do we get involved in community? One of the things for me that's really big about community is the true statement that nobody cares about your career more than you do. And various types of interaction with community can be extremely beneficial to your career. And that's certainly something that for me has been very true, and for people around me. I've seen people who have engaged in community purely for the reason of professional advancement, getting to the attention of the right people. So there's a few places that you can do this. Now, simply getting involved in a community to learn more is one of the big things. Being a consumer of the content of the community output can be very beneficial for your career. You can learn a lot, particularly if your employer isn't prepared to send you on structured training. One of the ways to show the initiative is to go out and learn for yourself, and there's a lot of community generated content that won't hurt your pay or imperil your relationship with your wife as you're spending lots of money on training. So there's lots of good low cost ways. The other thing about community is that there is a really small, relatively small group of people who produce the content, and there is a really large group of people who consume it. So there's a secondary kind of thread in this around becoming one of those who contribute and produce the content. Because what we see is that the people in this room today are all content creators, and everything they create is seen by a large number of people. Now that doesn't mean that they are necessarily the smartest people in the world. I don't mean to impugn anybody here, but there are smarter people around as well who simply don't do that outward pouring of information that generally comes from the people who are in this room. And I think everybody here can think of somebody they know somewhere who is smarter than them but is never seen on the internet because they're too busy working and it just doesn't suit them. So it's really important that people realize you don't have to be the smartest person in the room in order to bring something useful to the conversation, and that everybody's experience has value. One of the places that you can get involved in, and that I really do strongly recommend getting involved in, is with the VMUGs. And those who've watched Eric's presentation realize that the VMUGs are this local community, people around the regional areas getting together. And there is nothing like an in-person getting together and talking. A lot of the value that we find at this kind of event, like Virtualization Field Day, also comes in the VMUGs. It's outside of the presentations, while you're having a cup of coffee, while you're queuing to find something, food, toilets, whatever it is. Talking to the person standing next to you can be some of the most valuable thing that you do at an event. And the VMUGs are one of the places where this goes on. So even if you find that the presentations at VMUGs are too low level or too high level for you, or they're too focused on a vendor whose product you never use, there's a lot of value in the other people around you. VMUGs, though, struggle with getting users to come and bring their experience. And this is why what you see at a lot of the VMUGs is nothing but sponsor presentations. And it's really hard to get the people who are actually doing work in IT, actual customers working with products, who have real-world experience. And it's really hard to bring them into the VMUGs. And the other thing that VMUGs struggle with is that they have volunteers running it, and so getting time to do this. I thought to give that kind of perspective, because I'm a consumer of VMUG. I don't organise VMUG. I do occasionally present at VMUG, but I get a lot of value out of attending VMUG. On the other side of the fence, we have Eric Shanks, who is involved in organising one of the most successful VMUGs in the world, which is the Chicago VMUG. And I thought I'd ask Eric to share a little of the experience of being the organiser and some of the challenges, because you've been really successful at getting community members to come and present at your VMUGs.
Sure. I can't take much of the credit for that. The VMUG was very successful before I started being a leader there. But I can tell you, I've been involved with the VMUG for probably about 2 years. I've been a leader for over a year. It was very quick. Once I was a VMUG member, I was a VMUG leader shortly after that. I gave one presentation. They were asking for content on Site Recovery Manager. We're always trying to get users to give presentations, and I thought, well, I had just gotten done doing a large disaster recovery thing for a financial company, and I'm like, well, I have experience with that. Why don't I'll do it. Sure, why not? So gave a presentation, and what I realized was when I was done with the presentation, I was learning more by giving the presentation, because I had to make sure that all my stuff made sense. I wasn't going to give somebody bad information. That I was learning more from giving the presentations and talking about things than I was just going and listening. So that's when I said, you know, I'll be a leader, and it's a lot of work, and people don't want to get up and give presentations. So we have sponsors that give presentations, and we've got 4 or 5 other leaders there, and it's typically the leaders that give presentations and sponsors that give presentations. But when we can get one of the users to actually give a presentation, we get lots more feedback from the audience. I guess the audience feels like there's more equal footing, and really we're all in the same boat. We're all trying to learn something, and it's a lot of work, but you get a lot out of it.
Yeah, it's a lot of work to be one of the leaders who's doing the organising, but the role of the presenter is relatively low impact, but it's one of the things that's quite confronting for a lot of people who, particularly if you're not in the reseller consultant training kind of space, actually standing up and talking in front of people is terrifying for a lot of people. And Eric mentioned that there's often mentoring programs within the VMUGs to help members to get beyond that, and as he mentioned, it can be really good for your career to find anything that gets you over that hill of presenting in front of people, because there's a lot of roles where that's important, and being able to stand up and be relaxed as you talk in front of a group of people is incredibly valuable to your career. And of course, VMUG, hit to myvmug.com. Sorry, I might have put the wrong URL in there. Is it .org or .com?
vmug.com or myvmug.org.
And just looking around the room, roughly 1/3 of the attendees I know are delegates I know are actually organisers of VMUGs in one form or another and around the world. The next community activity that I'm deeply involved in is the Professional VMware vBrownBag podcast. This is a very long-running podcast that I've been involved with for the last couple of years. And it runs, the US one runs every week. We also have a EMEA, a European edition that runs in a time zone that's kind of more friendly to Europeans. And we have, where I live down in the APAC region, I run the APAC edition of that podcast. And that's 3 podcasts we're running. Well, there's a 4th one as well, because Kyle Murley runs a Spanish language, Latin American, US centered one. And so we are global. And we're producing content that's about helping anybody who wants to get better skills around virtualization. In fact, we even had a OpenStack podcast running at one stage, because Cody Bunch, the wonderfully crazy man who started the whole thing, he started working with OpenStack a lot more, and so he ran a Couch to OpenStack series starting for a while. Everything is run live like this. It's run live and it's streamed, and there's chat. We often do use Twitter exactly the same as here with a hashtag of vBrownBag to communicate backwards and forwards between presenters. The presenters are community members. They're people who are out there using the products and who themselves are preparing for certification. As Eric said, one of the best ways to learn something is to prepare to teach somebody else about it. It absolutely solidifies your knowledge, and it's the sole way I learn is by teaching. Hang on, I'd better learn some other way than teaching other people. My students might not like that. So everything is presented up live, everything is community generated, and everything is free. As is usually the case with this kind of recorded material, we get somewhere between 100 and 1,000 times as many people watch the episode by downloading it later and maybe listening to it on their favourite iDevice on their commute, or watching it on their PCs when they're really bored during WebExes. We cover the majority of the VMware certifications, so I started a trend where we would cover specific certifications rather than skill sets, and we now mix them up. We sometimes cover the entire blueprint for a certification, we sometimes cover additional skill sets that are really useful. One of the sequences we've done recently is an automate all the things, looking at lots and lots of different ways of automating things and how useful that can be in your career. So there's a whole heap of material around. Currently, absolutely randomly, poorly organized on the Professional VMware site because we're too busy generating content to curate it. That's on my to-do list, so we will get a better curated set out. Everything is free to download, everything's free to take part, and that's one of the key tenets for vBrownBag, is to give back to the community that is in fact creating vBrownBag. Like VMUG, we have this consistent, solid issue of finding people who will contribute content, who will stand up and be seen, and who will say, here's how you do something. A lot of the time, it's because people simply don't have the confidence that they know something. They all do. Everybody has fixed something, solved a problem, learnt something. And as Eric discussed, that we usually then move straight on to trying to fix and solve the next thing and learn the next thing. We often don't take the time to follow on and push the learnings to somebody else, and it's a really valuable thing to do. So please do volunteer to take part in the vBrownBags. The other thing that vBrownBag has been doing recently is going to VMworld and giving community members an opportunity to do a small presentation at VMworld through the Tech Talks. Tech Talks are just a 10-minute presentation that's done live, usually from the community floor in the hang space at VMworld, and we've done the last 4 VMworlds, and we've had usually around 40 people per show presenting content, and that's another really good way to get started on presentations, and particularly because there's a group of friends around you as you're doing it. Just a small group though, we keep the audiences really small and approachable. Now, I of course naturally stand up and talk a lot because I'm a trainer. You can't shut me up most of the time, at least in this situation. And I wanted to haul in my friend Andrea, who joins us from Italy, and he joined me for the desktop design sequence that we did on the VCAT desktop design, and that was an incredibly fun one because I had no prep to do for it. We just talked. And I'd just like Andrea to talk about that as well as his more recent experience with the EMEA vBrownBag.
Yeah, we have started together first time at VMworld US in these Tech Talks that I think probably is the best way, because are just really short, to become confident and try to do something. Could also be a way if you have submit a proposal for VMworld and was not accepted, to take a chance to do something, to try a presentation, and be not so much scared to talk, especially if you are not a native English people. That is probably a difficult level, another difficult level, unless you are a Dutch people that speak really good English or so on. But usually is a little more complicated because you have also to think in English, and is as I say, is another type of effort. But I really appreciate the scheme I used for the APAC vBrownBag, where you have an entire vBrownBag session that usually is an hour, less than an hour, without a schema, without a track, just with one blueprint objective to be covered, and just sharing experience, information, talked about how do you make or think about the requirements of these blueprints. And I think that is another way to think about how do presentation and so on, because you can do great presentation, but in this way you follow better the community approach, where 2, 3, 4 people just sharing and answer and have different comments. About the EMEA vBrownBag, they are almost recently, around 1 year. And I think that is really important for this live presentation. Have also something in your time zone, otherwise could be difficult. A pack of vBrownBag could be fine for us because are in the morning, but in the morning maybe you have also to work. US vBrownBag could be fine, but is a little too late for European people, so maybe you have a family and you have to you want to spend your time with your family, or just you have to sleep some hour. But having something in your time zone can bring more opportunity also to present. Otherwise, it could be difficult find a time slot during your work or during your family hours. And another thing that could be interesting for community could be the localization of a session, contribution, and so on. Because I know English is the Esperanto of IT, but is could be easy or manage use for reading, for listen, but for producing something is, as I said before, a more big effort, and so also for producing and consuming, having some localized version of vBrownBag or blog, podcast, and so on could be another type of value. So
I kind of, Andrea and I talking through that desktop design piece, I kind of felt like the machine gun because I go really fast, and then Andrea is the sniper. You've got to wait for the idea, but you really do need to wait for it because it's worth hearing. So I really enjoyed having Andrea on that one with me. And I also had Grant Orchard, who is a Australian-based resource, and doing the design stuff really worked with that conversational form. There are a variety of vBrownBags around. We are always interested in somebody who'd like to present something. We're absolutely happy that you present the same materials at VMUG. We love, vBrownBag loves VMUG because they're so closely aligned to what we do, and VMUG tends to love us. I think every single vBrownBag host has presented at VMUGs as well. Now, these are all kind of working with other people activities. These are all things where you work as part of a team, and so maybe that's not what works for you. So here's something that is working in isolation, both from the creator point of view was quite a lot of isolation, and also from the consumer point of view. So about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago now, I was working on a little project where I was going to create some lab manuals, and we were going to distribute them to help people. It was related to vBrownBag, help people get certified, get VMware certification by playing with a lab. In order to write this lab manual, we needed a lab environment. And so I built this nested lab environment on my laptop that I was using to document the processes that you do in the lab activity. And then I broke it because one of the labs got a little bit past where it needed to be, and we needed to change what the lab was going to be. So I started automating my lab build because I realized I was going to need to rebuild it repeatedly. After about 6 weeks of work on my lab build automation, I realized that the lab build automation was more valuable than the lab manual we were going to write. And that's how AutoLab came about. AutoLab is a free tool, absolutely free. Go download it from labguides.com. It contains a collection of empty shell virtual machines and a little pile of automation. What you do is you download this, currently 200 meg, 290 I think in the next release, download that contains these virtual machines. You bring your licensed software. Now I can't give you vSphere install media or Windows install media, but I can give you the Linux and in fact BSD based machines that are inside here. You need to bring your own ISOs, you need to bring your own install media. The combination of the two together and a PC that you can run a VMware virtualization platform on. So I built this thing on an old, at the time it was a 2.5-year-old laptop, now it's a 4.5-year-old laptop, 8 gigs of RAM and a solid state disk. and VMware Workstation. Works under VMware Player, works under Fusion, works under ESXi. You need one PC. You spark up a few virtual machines in it. So I include in there a NAS virtual machine that you can see at the right-hand side of the diagram. That's a free NAS VM, and that's where you dump your installers. So you power that guy on, dump a heap of installers onto a build share. And you power on a virtual machine called DC. Now I like short names. My company name is Demitas. The internal domain on my network is d.local. Shortest name I could find, right? So DC is the domain controller. You give it the 2008 R2 install ISO, you power it on, and you walk away. Damn, there's a gag that works in New Zealand that I can't do here because you don't get New Zealand ads here. You walk away, and actually in the deployment guide I tell you to go and talk to your wife, because that's what I do at that phase. I go and spend some time with my family. It's enough time in the time out, go and see the family. Because in an hour's time, at least in my lab environment, about an hour's time, you're going to have a Windows domain controller, the whole domain's there, DNS, DHCP, TFTP server, so Pixie. You will have a SQL server on that domain controller, and it will all be set up so that you can then start powering on some of the ESXi virtual machines. The whole domain's been built for you. The two ESXi virtual machines are in the version that's coming 3 in order to support vSAN. The 3 ESXi virtual machines, you just power those virtual machines on. They will Pixie boot. Depending upon what ESXi installers you put on that build share, you'll get a menu. It says, so, what do you want to build? Want to do a manual build of ESXi, or would you like to take one of these scripted builds? Which ESXi server number is this? We'll script to build that. So you power on these ESXi servers, they come up, they boot from the network, they do some very basic configuration. And you move on to the Virtual Center, VC. All right, not Victoria Cross, Virtual Center. You again present the Windows Server 2008 R2 ISO to him, turn him on, and walk away. Again, you come back after an hour. After an hour, you have Windows Server 2008 installed, joined to the same domain as the domain controller. vCenter is installed, pointing to the SQL server on the domain controller. Update Manager is installed, vSphere clients installed, and a few other things that were asked for along the way. And if you chose to, because sitting on that NAS build share, there's an initialization file. If you chose to, we'll even run a script, a PowerShell script, that connects to vCenter, creates a data center, creates a cluster, adds your 2 ESX servers or 3 ESX servers to it, creates some networking, creates some data stores, sets up some iSCSI and some NFS, registers some virtual machines if they already exist on the data stores. If they don't, it creates some virtual machines for you. So you can go from a set of installers in the zip file that you've downloaded to a fully functional HA DRS lab running nested virtual machines on your laptop in a morning, and of that morning you got to spend 2 hours with your significant other or doing some other work. So you can then learn how to run vSphere. You can convert from the standard virtual switch to distributed switch. You can deploy vSAN on this. The one that you can find on lab guides today, not quite. That's my vSphere 5.5 build is nearly ready to release, so shortly that'll come up. But you can build vSAN and find out that product that was launched, was announced today. You can find out more about that. Whole heap of stuff you can do, and if you break it, well, you just rebuild it. Because the rebuild process is just as easy as the initial build process. It's a place where you can test and learn without fear, because there's no consequence to breaking things. Well, no long consequence. All the automation that I've described, apart from the domain controller build, the actual Windows installs, everything else is optional. You can say, I actually want to do my own vCenter install. I want to do my own Update Manager install, because that's part of the VCP certification. On the other hand, if you want to do VCAP certification, studying for that, then you want all of this base level automation done for you, and then go and break some things or upgrade some things or change some things. So the automation pieces are absolutely optional. If you are studying for VMware certification, go to labguides.com, get hold of the Auto Lab. It's an easy, disposable lab. If in your organization, in the place where you work, there is one server left over for lab, we've come across these kinds of environments. There's a lab in the office, but the most aggressive engineer owns it. They've installed stuff on it, nobody else is allowed to touch it. All right, convert it over. One of the design items I wanted for AutoLab was the ability to run multiple of them on top of one ESXi server, and every member of staff gets their own AutoLab running nested on top of one big server. There are a whole heap of community resources around. Anybody who has done something in tech, has learnt something, can contribute. Real-world experience is the most valuable thing that you can contribute back to the community. I did this and it broke in this way, and then I made it work in this way. That's some of the best value you can get out there. God, 3 years after I wrote it, the post about how to undelete a VMFS data store is still the most visited page on my website. Absolutely, bring your experience and just start it. As similar to Eric, it was just start. Start going and writing something, start engaging with community, turn up to VMUG, talk to people at VMUG. Attend, listen to vBrownBag, think about whether you could actually do that yourself. You could present something. Just get involved. There are a lot of people who consume the content that's produced. There are a smallish group of people who produce the content, and it's very beneficial to both sides. Everybody learns more from this. And that is all I really had to say about community helping community. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Just one thing I'll add for folks that, along the vein of what's happened with what Alastair's done on the lab guides and with the auto lab and with his community in the vBrownBag and what Cody started with vBrownBag. And Alastair talked about the OpenStack side of things, and so strangely enough, I've got this weird side thing that I do, and I've become sort of the OpenStack guy, and it's mostly because nobody else thought like they wanted to try it, and I'm just dumb enough to give it a whirl. I'm the guy that always gets in the pool when it looks too cold. I'll just jump in. So that's what I did with OpenStack, and what ended up happening was, I connected with Cody and learned a lot from him, and actually then started doing exactly what Alastair talked about, and I started contributing back to that same community. So in the vBrownBag on Tuesday nights, we ran an OpenStack one. Now it was a little lighter, it was tougher because the learning curve for it is fairly steep. I'm not going to lie, it's not necessarily as simple as a GUI deployment of vSphere. So, but same thing as if you can go through, and we had a couched OpenStack series, and that couched OpenStack series was built around having just like a couch to 5K. So you didn't have to have previous knowledge to do this. So that's the good thing, is that you can do it, and it's all scripted. Cody is, a scripting rock star. He put together some great scripts that run on Vagrant with VirtualBox. Sorry, run on VirtualBox with Vagrant. I got to get that right. Sorry, Mitchell. It's Mitchell Hashimoto will kill me for calling them the wrong thing. So they're free, 100% free. Free as in beer, free as in kittens, free as in love. It is free, and then you can run the whole product, and you start the script, and along the lines of what AutoLab does, is it runs for about half an hour, and your laptop will heat up a little bit, but next thing you know, you've got 5 machines, a fully featured multi-host OpenStack laboratory running right on your laptop or your computer as well. I've done a smaller series, just a direct like one node all-in-one. And that's a great opportunity. Along, again, we know what Alastair did is he suggested, hey, like, why don't we get more content? And so we did. We drove this, and it's actually going to spin back up again. So we did the couch to OpenStack. We're probably going to revisit some of that, and then because the version has changed and some more folks are ready to contribute. So again, if you folks want to get involved in that, absolutely come out. Download the podcasts that are there. Reach out to myself, to Cody, to VM Trooper on Twitter. So Trevor Roberts, and Trevor's a great resource, phenomenal dude, and just a super cool guy. You'll see him at VMworld, hopefully, if you're all coming. So again, community is growing around that, and we're always looking for people that want to not even have to contribute and present or build stuff for it, but try it out and just kind of confirm that we're doing the right thing, and maybe it's something that you want to learn from.
I'll say a few words.
Okay.
From here, if it's okay. I suppose I kind of accidentally ended up being a freelance consultant about a year and a bit ago, and it wasn't my intention to do so, but I had also decided to get involved with trying to become more certified, because I was very interested in VMware, in the technology, like probably most people here. And when I started to explore the more advanced exams, I kind of found that the only way to really get through those hurdles was to use all of the community resources, which is kind of when I discovered the unbelievable effort that people were putting into creating all of these blogs and guides and documents, and it completely blew me away personally, which is why in the space of 9 months, you know, I'm a bit of a social media, you know, I would kind of tend to avoid it up to this point, but I found Twitter has been incredibly powerful in terms of the community. People have helped me personally, that it does make you want to kind of give back. I, you know, managed, luckily enough, I passed a couple of exams thanks to all the people who put together content. So, but I suppose this is just an illustration that from kind of 0 to 9 months' time, I'm here today, which is just a brilliant opportunity, you know. But I think it's unique within the IT industry. I don't know of any other area. If there is one, good luck, that's fantastic. But, you know, especially for someone like me who was a freelance, you know, you do have a feeling of being isolated on your own, and all of a sudden you go to VMworld and you start meeting people by, you know, as we say in Ireland, by the Gansey load, and then the next thing you know 50 people in the UK who are like your friends within the space of 3 months. And I don't know where else you can get that type of benefit, you know, which is why I feel like Eric and Alastair that, you know, time permitting, I want to give back purely because I benefited from all of that, you know, people's good nature basically. And, you know, I think if whoever can give whatever time they can, it's such a benefit, and it's a good example, I think, for others as well. So
one of the things that made me really happy was to talk to Mike Laverick last year and thank him for inspiring me, for all of the content that he produced in those early ESX 3 days, and say, you know, you're one of the guys who inspired me to get involved in community and produce things. The kind of philosophy behind Autolab also came out of Nick Weaver's Linksbat's giving away all sorts of really cool tools and just carrying that on. I'm really pleased to see so many new faces here and some young faces as well, because there needs to be more generations of community coming through, and we as the sort of grey-haired and balding guys need to encourage new people to come in and do as Stephen's doing of bringing them in and making sure they feel valued and important in the place, and that's a really important thing for the community.
Excellent. Anyone else? Does anyone else have you've talked about some cool tools that you all like. Does anyone else have any cool tools they want to share? You know, we heard about automating OpenStack, automating VMware Labs.
I think the Power Packs, the community Power Packs that build on PowerShell are, you know, not widely talked about, but they're, you know, Alan Renouf and people like him are fantastic tools that are just, you know, free, and so many people don't actually know about them. Yeah. Along with RV tools, but they're ones that I don't see used that often, that I certainly use whenever I get the chance.
Those tools, I actually used this deck at the Sydney and Melbourne VMUG summits, and I took out the bits that weren't straight community. Yeah, the RV tools and vCheck, for me, every time I do a health check with a customer, these are two tools that I go to when I come in to do the health check, and that I leave behind when I leave after the health check. They're both awesome tools, and both given away for free. And particularly vCheck, now that it's a modular piece, is community developed as well, and lots of people can contribute their own plugins to it, which is awesome.
And I mean, we met a lot of folks throughout the last couple of days, and we're going to meet some more tomorrow, and that's really you know, folks that have presented at VMUGs, and they have NFR copies and community edition copies that they have. You know, Cloud Physics was a good example. So there's a community edition of it, so you don't have to buy it to use it. You know, Veeam has a free edition. You know, a lot of these companies would love for people to try their products, and let's never be afraid to reach out and say, hey, I like the idea of your product, however, you know, I got to test it. I mean, sometimes they're short trials, but, you know, sometimes they're just, hey, just don't run this in production, you know, and I'll give you a 1-year license. There's a lot of great resources, you know, that are available, and it's just good to ask.
The other thing I wanted to echo was Eric's comment about thank you. You know, we get Autolab, we get 30,000 downloads a year, but the thing that is most special to me is the once a month I'll get an email saying thank you, and those are absolutely magical. So there's nothing wrong with being the 100 people who consume. We produce so that it can be consumed. The most valuable thing you can do, apart from producing yourself, is to say thank you to somebody who has helped you along the way. We know we can't inspire everybody to go out and share, but that little thank you is the thing that keeps everybody very happy to be producing the content.
I have a couple thoughts real quick. So one thing I wanted to make sure was really clear about AutoLab, because I didn't feel like it was. You can run that on very little hardware. So you know, you don't need to have a big old ESX host to run this virtual lab. You can run it on your laptop, take it with you. So
8 gigs of RAM, dual core CPU, 100 gigs of spare disk space. Preferably SSD disk space, and more of everything is nice.
And then kind of about what you were saying about being able to thank Mike. I just wanted to say to David, I'm 100% sure that I wouldn't be right here if it wasn't for some of the work that you did, some train signal stuff that I bought early on in my career. So I just want to publicly say thank you to you, because I'm here because of that work.
Wow, thank you, thank you. I'll throw out something. In 2008, I went to my first VMworld, and I created an ESX server training course, and I didn't know a single person in the VMware community. And they sent me 100 DVDs to hand out, and I asked the bookstore manager if I could give them away free in front of the bookstore. And I was like a circus barker. I was like, free training? Anybody? Anybody? Free training? Free training? And people were like, nah, and they just kept on walking, you know. Some people took them. I was able to give out 50 finally. I was thankful just to get rid of 50, you know, that people actually took these. The other 50 I had to actually send back home because I was just tired of trying to give them away. But at that VMworld, I didn't know anyone. And Mike Laverick, actually, I think he was on the bus with me going to the Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and he was like, happened to be, I don't know how it turned out, but he was like the only person I think that talked to me. And I ended up, you know, spending the evening just chatting with Mike and learned so much. And, you know, from there, Train Signal started to flourish, thankfully. And then Cody actually came to me and he said, I want to start this brown bag, this community brown bag thing, and I need a sponsor just to pay for the GoTo webinar account. And so I asked Train Signal if they would help. I said, you know, maybe it'll take off, who knows? I said, okay. So we, you know, I'm proud to say, we didn't do all the hard work that these guys and Cody did, but I'm proud to say that, you know, Mike helped me, and then, you know, I feel like I helped Cody a little bit by being the first
We really appreciate
sponsor.
Train Signal.
Yeah, being the first sponsor, and then it's amazing just how, you know, help, you know, one person helps another person, even just a little bit, and that person helps another person, and it's kind of a snowball effect. So.
And everybody pays it forward.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd like to say something, and my name's Jeff. If you're watching on the internet, and I'm not really a VMware guy, but I've really appreciated that community spirit, and I want to thank you guys for welcoming me in and being open to my probing and annoying questions at times. And the thing I wanted to say is that you know, and it's not just a virtualization field day. I really appreciate tech field day because there are multiple disciplines you can jump into, and virtualization can enable them in a really cool way, just like they enabled us to save money in a data center, you know, to stop having so many physical boxes. If you're young and you're in IT and you want to explore the path ahead, maybe you like network, maybe you like storage. I think this AutoLab idea, I think this AutoLab idea is just amazing because not only are you going to learn how to stand up a VMware architecture, but you can then go and play with a tool like Mininet, which is a full network simulator inside of a virtual machine. Or one of my favorites is WAN emulator. I use that a lot to simulate latency on long LAN link, and that'll work inside of a virtual machine. There's tons of these storage systems as well. FreeNAS, NAS for free, Nexenta. So the sky's the limit, and I think it's amazing that you know, like you, Alastair, if I had found your stuff, I would have saved a lot of time in trying to learn the VMware side. But so yeah, take advantage of it and you know, propel your career and then give back.
All right.
All right. Okay, I'll go.
Okay.
I've been writing for a long time. I've been writing since '99. I've written probably like 5,000 articles. I didn't get into this originally as part of the community. It was somebody came to me one day and said, hey, Tech Republic is looking for people to write paid articles for them. And so back in '99, it was the new thing, so I started doing it. Over the years, obviously, I've learned a lot more. But I decided about 2.5 years ago to basically quit my job. And I remember telling my wife, and she went, "You're gonna do what now?" And it was really, I felt comfortable doing that because of the community. Obviously, the community that I started to join. But a lot of that's really thanks to Stephen. And I've said that before, but it really is true. And that's where I met David. And we're now business partners. We started a business together about 1.5 years ago. If it wasn't for him and Twitter, I'd be still sitting behind a miserable desk. So there were a lot of opportunities that opened up, and he's made a lot of recommendations to people as how I got into Wikibon. I mean, it's all about the people you know. And so it's really helped me be able to stay on my own and actually feed my children, which they really appreciate. And
did you say beat your children?
I hope I said feed because it's on video.
Okay.
I'm not very eloquent tonight. I'm sorry. I'm not feeling well. But it's really been awesome, and I've met a lot of you offline. I mean, a couple of you guys I've been working with now for a while. I never met you until today, or until this week, and it's awesome. I mean, I tell my wife that my Twitter friends are my actual friends, and you guys are a big part of that.
Yeah, I know more people at VMworld than I do in New Zealand.
Yeah,
there's more people at VMworld than there are in the entire city or country, right?
The city I live in, it's close.
Somebody told me that Facebook is for the friends you used to have and Twitter is for the friends you should have, and I totally believe that.
I think as well, like coming from Ireland, to say it's a small world, but I didn't realise that a country this size could be like, you know, even been out last night, and you know, I know Vaughn Stewart was there, and there was other people there, and everybody knew each other from VMware, and it's again the same thing. Like, it's a small community. Somebody made that remark today. It's incredible that how connected it all is. Like, it's smaller than Dublin and everything I can make out. So.
Yeah, I think we can all pretty much say we're all better in general for having met each other. You know, even Eric, you know, as a Chicago fan, I try not to hold against him now. Yeah, we've all, you know, we've grown a lot even this week. Like I told Steven, so this is like it's like a breakfast club. You know, we're going to walk out of here and we're all going to, you know, give hug handshakes and we'll communicate a lot more as a result of this, and hopefully we'll meet here again or somewhere again in this forum or in another forum. So.
But on a different scale, most of us attend VMUGs when we get the opportunity, and again, it's that personal contact that we really value here. But I like Scott, I'd like to thank Stephen for the opportunities that he gives us, and the exposure and the support and the friendship.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I wasn't mic'd in, I would stand up and I would say, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," and we would all stand at our desks.
Okay, that's enough. That's enough.
So I actually wanted to.
You're going to give me a big head. Okay, we got to ditch you here too.
No, I mean from a vendor perspective, right? I'm on the other side, and I think just a real quick synopsis. Like when I joined Coho about 2 years ago, roughly, right? And I said, "Hey guys, we should talk to, you know, bloggers like yourselves, people that really get behind products and get excited about them." And from a vendor perspective, it's been awesome that you guys just pick up a product, write about it, spend time to review it for just as asking, will you take a look, give me some feedback. I mean, you look at Gartner, you look at Forrester and all these analysts, and I'll be honest, I don't think they know as much as you guys do. It might be a bold thing to say, but when it comes to early products, you guys are willing to kick the tires, give feedback, and do it gently also if the product has issues. And from a vendor perspective, I mean, that's huge for us. That it's almost like testing it out with customers, but just at an earlier stage and refining the product. And also you guys are so vocal about it when something works, how beautifully it works. And also you're kind when it, you know, it doesn't work as well, and you're willing to help to make it get there. And so from a vendor perspective, I think the community is just awesome. And how it's grown, I've seen like leaps and bounds every year. It just seems to grow bigger and bigger. And these field day events, generally more and more people attend and more people are registering for them. So I mean, from a vendor perspective, I think it's just awesome. And it really helps us get off the ground as a startup. So
cool.
Awesome.